More pay to play allegations surfacing against Hillary Clinton. According to the Washington Examiner, countries and companies that donated to the Clinton Foundation or paid Bill Clinton hefty speaking fees saw an uptick in State Department activity while Hillary served as Secretary of State. For example, months after Bill delivered a speech in Riyadh for a pricey sum of $300,000, State Department funding for projects and activities in Saudi Arabia spiked. Meantime, there's also a new report that Sidney Blumenthal, a longtime confidant and problem fixer for the Clintons, was on the Clintons' charity's payroll while he was providing unsolicited intelligence advice on Libya to Hillary when she was Secretary of State. Harris, this list of countries that donated to the Clinton Foundation is pretty long. UAE, Norway, Ireland, and Bahrain, specifically countries that don't have the best track records with women. Bahrain, specifically, the kingdom donated almost $8 to $9 million, and then in what appears to be a quid pro quo, they got almost $10 million in funding from the State Department.
Yeah, you know that the trouble, though, with all of this is you have to prove that. And so it just becomes one of those things that we talk about. But when you look at the total list, it's worth talking about. I mean, there is some explaining that has to be done. So also on the list is that trade treaty that got done with Colombia right about the time that the Clinton Foundation benefited from some pretty hefty donations, and its donor benefited from that treaty, for instance. And then you had the situation with Algeria, which I think is probably what you're alluding to. $500,000 right about the time that we saw an increase in trips and visits and communications between that country and the State Department. It was dealing with a lot of human rights violations and probably would have benefited greatly if the State Department didn't put them on a certain list. You see where I'm going there? But again, I mean, all you're doing right now is kind of trying to draw lines to dots and connect things. But there are so many potential connections.
And Charles, I mean, Saudi Arabia in particular spends millions of dollars to fund Wahhabism, which is an anti-West theory, and they're one of the biggest contributors to the foundation. Specifically, that example that I referenced earlier, $300,000, and all of a sudden Bill shows up.
There are charts out there that specifically show Bill's speaking fees and these sort of donations spiking as Hillary became, more, she got the job, and then as things started to happen. But I don't know that we have to prove anything, Harris. We can connect the dots. Listen, we'll never probably be able to prove there was an official quid pro quo, but it's up to the voters to decide, do you want this sort of a dark cloud over the White House? Do you actually have a president that you might think could be bought and paid for?
But we do need to prove it. I mean, of course we need to prove it.
Why do you have to prove? Why do you can't just the voter doesn't have to prove it?
You don't have to make accusations and then say, oh, something.
It's not accusations. We're talking facts.
No, hold on. No, you just said, but we don't really need to prove it. I mean, we do need to find out what actually happened. Was it coincidence or causation? Did something actually happen? But wait, I want to also say
the fact that it happened smells bad for a would-be president.
That's what I'm saying. These countries, Saudi Arabia, who I have criticized plenty, is an ally of the United States. So it's not as though they're interacting with any country that we wouldn't normally be interacting with. And the money that's being given by these countries to the foundation is going to good works.
Russia ends up with uranium from Canada. How does that happen?
It's not a direct payment to Bill Clinton. It's helping with health. It's building schools.
But Kirsten, it appears that this is a slush fund for friends and family. And as much as the Clintons want to say that
there is evidence of that.
But so you said we have to prove.
Well, let me prove it.
But how do we prove all the good works too?
You can go and look. You can talk.
Look at the example in Norway.
There's a New York Times story today about how it's supposedly so shady that someone made a donation to Bill Clinton for $500,000, but then we find out, where did the $500,000 go? It built 10 schools in Indonesia. What's shady about that?
Okay, well, let's look at the example of Norway. I mean, because everybody's saying you want to see a case where policy changed. Norway, they were looking to build a big facility there. The diplomats in Norway from the U.S. said, no, it's not worth it. It's not worth the money. The government gave money to the Clinton Foundation. The State Department turned around and went ahead and built a new embassy for $177 million against the wishes of the diplomats that were in that country. They said, we don't need it. But after money was given to the Clintons, the State Department went and turned around and built the embassy.
But we have to.
You're looking for a change in policy as a result of money. That timing works.
I think that is a good example of something that needs to be looked into. But having worked in the government, I can tell you that it is not always the diplomats get overruled all the time. So we don't know for sure.
What about Blumenthal?
Look at what happened in Libya. Look at what happened in Libya.
You brought up Libya. What about Sidney Blumenthal, a man that the Obama administration said is nowhere allowed near the State Department? Here she's funding basically bankrolling him through the foundation, and then getting his intelligence advice, not the director of Homeland Security, not the director of Intel at the CIA, a guy named Sidney.
Yeah,
doesn't that trouble you?
I think it shows bad judgment. I don't think there's anything. I mean, it wasn't. I think you said it was unsolicited advice. It was solicited advice. She trusts Sidney Blumenthal. This is one of her blind spots. I can't explain it. You know, she has always had him around, and it makes, and he causes problems. And I think that this was a problematic relationship, but nothing. Nothing illegal happened, and nothing.
You just used the phrase "bad judgment."
Yeah.
At the very least, then you admit bad judgment here. At the very least, you admit coincidences here, and we are talking about perhaps electing someone. A series of coincidences. A series of them means a lot to a lot of people when we're trying to decide if this person should be in charge of the world's greatest economic power, our country.
You don't judge people on coincidences. You judge people on facts.
There's enough of them. I do.
Charles, what you're saying is that there are really
people are going to prison for enough coincidences and enough circumstantial
evidence. People are not going to prison.
But there are really two different issues here, because there's the criminality side, which, as I was saying, if something
but we can't prove that. We may never be able to prove that.
Well, we don't know that, though.
I know. No, I hope they investigate it. Like what Melissa just brought up. I want them to investigate it. I don't think it would be wholehearted on the Obama administration. But as Americans, do we have to act dumb about this? Do we have to say, "Oh, they haven't proven it, but it looks bad. It smells. It stinks really bad"?
I don't know why it's like a crazy thing to think we should prove something. The way you're acting, like it's crazy that I think that we would actually want to look at facts instead of just start throwing things against the wall and saying this looks bad.
You know why? Because she's running for president of the United States, and she hasn't answered the questions, and she destroyed any type of evidence that would prove any of this. I mean, this is horrible. And to the American people, they're like, we can't write these kind of checks. We can't make donations to the foundation if you want the Clintons to help.
The irony is she didn't destroy all the evidence. She might have done better just to delete every single email, because the Blumenthal connection is something that came out of the batch of 296 Benghazi-related emails that she actually handed over to the State Department.
But there actually is evidence. So, I mean, to what Melissa brought up, there is evidence that can be looked into.
This is kind of in the same